Hello, John from the Lib Dem Podcast here. We are delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Prater Rains. Now more than ever, you need a professional-looking online presence and website. Prater Rains have been helping Liberal Democrat campaigns succeed for 18 years. Their Lib Dem Foci package combines a website, social media and email system to help Lib Dems win. You'll receive great support from real people, fair pricing and a huge range of features to choose from. Prater Rains are already the bespoke developers for Lighthouse, Lib Dem Draw Online and the LD Directory. They combine a talented system design with an unrivaled understanding of our party, our data and our systems. To find out more, check out the Prater Rains website at praterrains.co.uk/liberal-democrats. Now, on with the podcast.
There's really nothing progressive about nationalism. And you can try and argue this type of nationalism is different. I just don't think that's true.
Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. Thank you for tuning in, whether it is on your podcast provider or via YouTube or Facebook. We really appreciate you coming on. And today we've got a very special guest. So we have got the number one candidate for our number one target seat in Scotland next year. This is Molly Nolan. Welcome to the podcast, Molly.
Thank you. Really great to be here.
So, I mean, wow, you have set yourself up for a busy few months.
I have. We have selected really early in Caithness, Sunderland and Ross because it is our number one target seat. So obviously there's a lot of selection still ongoing, a lot still to do. The regional lists haven't been selected yet, but we are on the front foot in Caithness.
Well, and we have talked in the past on previous podcasts, particularly with, say, Lisa Smart when she became the target candidate for Hazel Grove here in the Northwest. So do you want to tell us a little bit how you decide, how it went about for you? What was the process? Because I bet a lot of our listeners probably have no idea how you become such an important candidate for the party. So how did that process go for you? Yeah,
well, I mean, I would say that I've not been a member that long, maybe since 2017, but I've been a Lib Dem supporter my whole life. Essentially, it came down to the seat is selecting, I'm a member, and that's where I'm from, and I want to make it better. And I think the thought process can often be more complex for people, but that's really what it came down to for me. It's just such a special part of the world. I grew up there, I live there today. And I want to improve it. There's a lot that needs to be done and it's very unique. And I think that's crucial. So if you're from somewhere and you know it, put yourself forward to make it better.
Yeah. And so I mean, just a little bit of your backstory. So like you said, you're from a tiny, I'm going to get it wrong. Is it Everton? Is it from? Yeah, and then you went off and studied abroad in America, and then I've come back. So that's a heck of a journey. And when you were abroad, do you think I'm going to come back and I'm going to run for Scottish Parliament? Was that something that was always in your mind?
No, I went out to the US when I was 18 to do my undergrad degree, and as I progressed through that, a lot of people said to me, "Oh, you'll love it out there, you'll want to stay." But I always thought, actually, no, I want to come back. And I'm really involved with traditional Scottish music. I went to a music school when I was in my sixth form equivalent, and I just wanted to come back. So I moved back in June 2019, and it, just
went
kind
on
of
from
started.
There.
Yeah, basically started working. Met Jamie, had a few conversations, and decided that it was something I really wanted to pursue.
I think also we should explain to listeners and viewers just whereabouts the constituency is. So basically in the far northwest one. So as soon as you go past Inverness, you can right the way up to John O'Groats. And so, I mean, if you take Preston as kind of the centre of the UK, it would take me 6 hours just to get to your constituency by car, and then another 2 hours to get to the top of it from there. So it is geographically, it's huge.
Absolutely. So it's 25,000 square kilometres.
Wow.
which is obviously massive. And the other thing about it is that obviously the geography makes it slower to travel by car. So you can look at it and say it's 100 miles that would take me a couple of hours. In reality, on a single track road, it's going to take longer. So it really is a mammoth constituency, actually bigger than Jamie Stone's equivalent seat in Westminster. We've got an extra little bit in the southwest corner. So it's really quite unique.
And I suppose, again, now, just to talk through the actual, the political kind of boundaries and what that means. So Jamie Stone is the MP for the area. Now, for the Scottish elections, there are 8, let me get this right, there's the Highlands and Islands electoral region, which has 8 different areas. Each of those areas has a first past the post kind of election, as well as then 7 seats that are up through proportional representation. Have I got that right? That's the first thing.
That is correct. So that's the way it works around Scotland. We've got all these different regions. Highlands and Islands, obviously geographically is the biggest. It's nearly half the landmass of Scotland. And we have got 2 MSPs there already, Beatrice Wishart in Orkney and Liam MacArthur in Shetland. Other way around. And then we have Jamie Stone in Westminster. So we've got a great Liberal presence within that region already.
And I suppose, and so back in 2016, the SNP have this seats. This is why it's one of our targets. So we came comfortably second with 31% of the vote. But the SNP have about just shy of 4,000 majority. So obviously you're going out to win. It's our number 1 target seat. What is campaigning like on the ground right now?
Obviously, COVID has sort of stopped face-to-face campaigning. We've had some literature through the doors for Jamie recently, which has gone down really well. And obviously, we're trying to do as much as we can remotely. But at the moment, campaigning for me is very much a digital experience. And I think that's the same for candidates everywhere. That being said, obviously, in 2019, Jamie won his seat back with an increased majority. So we are hopeful that there's a really good shot here. And I think we can do well.
And I suppose it's kind of, because it's such a geographically huge area, I suppose it becomes very, and I think of, say, Tim Farron's constituency in South Lakeland, or Brecon and Radnorshire, which we campaigned in last year. When you have these huge geographical areas, digital campaigning becomes almost more important, because obviously it becomes so difficult to get to all these tiny little villages and farm tracts here, there and everywhere.
Absolutely. I think one of the issues we do have in Caithness, Sutherland and Ross is the lack of internet accessibility. Some places still don't have good broadband. So it is important for us to actually go out and meet these people, talk to them, call them up, send them literature. But you are right, when you want to cover such a large area, digital campaigning just becomes crucial. And we are really going to be focusing on that this year.
And I'm really fascinated about from your perspective of how things lying with Scotland at the moment, because everything's Westminster focused. Let's just say, everything's Southeast England focused generally news wise. So what is because we're going through at the moment all the stuff with the exams crisis and everything else, but the SNP have handled that horrendously as well. But it's just that the Tories in Westminster tend to do it just that little bit worse. So what are the feelings in Scotland regarding the West about the SNP?
Well, the SNP have been in power for 13 years now, which is a very long time. And, in my opinion, their record just isn't great. We've obviously had the exams fiasco, but the education difficulties stretch back longer than that. And, where we once were one of the best countries in the world for education, we're now slipping down the rankings every year. There are other problems as well that haven't been addressed. Specifically in my constituency, we have huge issues with access to healthcare. We've got issues with tourism and the lack of resources to make it sustainable. There are big problems. And it does tend to become a bit of a comparison between Scotland and England, who's doing better, who's doing worse. But that's not the way that I want to look at it. We have our Scottish Parliament, we have our Westminster Parliament. Both of them are in charge of different things. Both of them should be working well, and that's not the case at the minute.
Yeah, and I think I'd love to get your impressions of an overview of where like the general sense in Scotland? I mean, because in your seat, obviously, you'll want, it's a classic Lib Dem kind of messaging. The Tories and Labour can't win here. It is absolutely a contest between you and the SNP. But how is the general political view in Scotland at the moment regarding the Tories seem to be in meltdown in Scotland. Labour just don't know how to get themselves back off the floor. Is that what you're seeing in your constituency?
Absolutely. I think Labour have not had a consistent message, and the Tories have obviously, they are sort of in disarray internally, but they've also just done really badly to govern the country. I think the Lib Dems have actually come out with the most sort of consistent message that makes sense, being consistently internationalist and focusing on getting local powers back to local people across the UK. So I think in that sense, it's definitely a straight fight between the SNP and the Lib Dems, but our message has really resonated as something that is consistent.
And obviously, you want to win next year and things like that. Where do you think is the SNP ready to be knocked off its perch a little bit next year? How do you, if you were to, I mean, a week's a long time in politics, so we're still months away. But how do you feel the landscape is at the moment?
I think we're at a bit of a moment just before something happens. Essentially, I think the COVID crisis, obviously, there'll be a review into that. The education fiasco will have long-running implications that won't make themselves known until next year, really.
How important are these elections in Scotland next year?
I think they're critical. One seat can make the difference in terms of whether or not we sort of go back to just talking about whether or not Scotland should be independent. And I really want to focus on everyday issues. There's polling out yesterday saying, people think that, talking about independence all the time is a distraction. And it's true. There are plenty of everyday things that need fixed that I think we need to prioritise. That being said, it is true that the country is quite divided. My perspective is that I'm a committed federalist. I don't believe that the choices between separatism and hard unionism. I think we need to reform our relationship within the UK, not just in Scotland, but within all four nations. And that's a message I really want to get across. The most progressive future that we have in the Highlands will be as part of a progressive United Kingdom that has local powers all across, not just in Scotland, but everywhere.
And do you think, this is not aimed at anyone in particular, but kind of English Lib Dems get sometimes just assume the SNP are some cuddly, fluffy teddy bear of a party that aren't nice. And we have to give credit to Nicola Sturgeon is a good political operator. She knows what she's doing. She she sounds like she knows what she's doing. And actually, like you've just said, the actual truth is there's been some horrendous mistakes made by the SNP in Scotland. But you get it quite regularly in England saying, if I was in Scotland, I might want independence as well. And how do you respond to that? Because it surely cannot be helpful for people who are almost like backseat driving the campaign in Scotland.
Absolutely. Well, as to your point about Nicola Sturgeon, she is a good communicator, but you're right that the policies and the ideologies behind that are flawed. And what I would say to maybe English liberals is there's really nothing progressive about nationalism. And you can try and argue this type of nationalism is different. I just don't think that's true. We are for integration with Europe. We're for integration with the UK. We want to open up borders, make people give them the opportunity to move about freely. You don't do that by isolating yourself from your closest neighbours.
And the arguments. Are you seeing, because we see a bit of it, again, Twitter's not the real world and people go crazy, these kind of signs saying English people not wanted here kind of thing on the border. And I suppose that's the ugly underbelly of some of the messaging that's coming out, actually. If you whip up this sort of, it's a type of xenophobia, basically, it has ugly consequences down the line.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the biggest failings of this government is they haven't called that rhetoric out unequivocally. They've allowed it to fester, and it's just getting worse. I see a lot of parallels with the sort of rhetoric around the sort of very ugly side of nationalism and the very ugly side of pro-Brexit as well. But, I accept that people who are pro-UK have done not a great job in recent years of actually making the case for it. What I would say is I detest this Conservative government as much as anybody else, but the response to that, I don't think it's about saying, okay, well, we're off. I think it's about saying to our friends, our families, our colleagues in other parts of the UK, okay, we're in this together. How can we make it better for everybody, not just the people of Scotland? I don't think that's helpful to anyone.
And what are the big issues that you guys are going to be tackling? Obviously, independence, like you said, can be seen as a little bit of a distraction, because the SNP know if they talk about independence, then some of their failings don't get covered. It's a bit like Donald Trump using racism and immigration. It's a cover for all the other mistakes that he's kind of done. So, but what are the huge issues for you? Do you think this election is going to be about next year?
I think there's a huge appetite for more local powers. So over the past 13 years, the SNP have really centralised a lot of powers in Edinburgh, and that's been detrimental for the Highlands and Islands, as you'd understand, it being very remote. Those communities have very unique needs, and they know what they need best, but they're not being given the resources to actually deal with that. So I think that's going to be crucial. Also, obviously, our COVID recovery, how we deal with our economy going forward, is going to be huge. In the Highlands and Islands, we're focused on tourism in a big way, and that's become increasingly difficult, weighing up the economy with public health. So I think real sustainable plans for our tourism sector are going to be important, and that's something that hasn't been coming through yet. As I've said before, equal access to essential services is a big one, and Jamie has been talking about this a lot over the past 3 years, but particularly access to clinical healthcare services is really poor in parts of the Highlands and Islands, and it's unacceptable to make people travel a 250-mile round trip just to get the care they need. I think all those things are gonna be key next year.
And so if people are listening to this, watching this, thinking, look, I really want to help out, where should we direct them to go if they want to help out your campaign?
The first place you can go is mollynolan.uk, which is my website. It's currently a little bit sparse, but it's getting populated. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram as Molly C. Nolan. All of those places I keep very updated, and you can get involved. We are absolutely looking for people to support the campaign, whether it be in the Highlands or from afar. As I say, much of this is about digital and remote campaigning. You can get involved from wherever you are.
Yeah, and also you can go to the Scottish LibDems.org.uk website as well to see some of the campaigns that are happening around Scotland and what you're fighting for. But it's been fantastic talking to you. Is there anything else you want to kind of raise? This could be your pitch. This could be your 5-minute pitch to our listeners. Anything else you want to bring up?
Well, I think that we know as a party that we're going through some changes. We're doing a lot of introspection with the Thornhill Review and the leadership election. I think this is a time to be positive, and I think that we have really good prospects if we get our messaging right in Holyrood next year. So I would just say, please feel positive about this. Please get involved if you can. We have a good year ahead of us.
And supposed to, actually, you just brought this up, so you see, this is the problem. So you've triggered something else in me now that I want to ask you about. So the Thornhill Review obviously talked about lots of failings we had kind of done, but actually the Scottish campaign in 2019, aside from 100 and something odd votes that Jo Swinson obviously lost her seat in, was actually, Wendy Chamberlain took back North East Fife. Okay, it was 2 votes she needed, but still. But we kept our seats, and we were very close to growing in Scotland despite everything that happened. When you think of what happened to Labour, etc., it wasn't a bad result in the Lib Dems in Scotland. But we tend to think of just the Lib Dem power base being, Southeast London, lovely kind of university academic kind of areas like Bath and places like that. So what was the Scottish Lib Dems reaction to the 2019 result?
Well, we've always been strong in Scotland, and I think it proves that the only credible message against SNP rhetoric is liberalism. Wendy is obviously an excellent campaigner, but she stormed that. She didn't just get 2 votes. She has an overwhelming majority there now. We were also, second in a fair number of seats. Scotland is receptive to the Lib Dem message, and I think when you have 4 times the number of Scottish MPs that Labour has, you can really see that we are a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that is the perfect place to end the podcast. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on, Molly. I really appreciate your time. I say, do go and follow Molly on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Go visit the website. Go visit the Scottish Lib Dems website. Remember, we don't know what's going to happen with campaigning the rest of the year. We don't know what's going to happen with campaigning up to May next year. So if you can donate time or money or something to help get out the campaigning, especially in huge rural constituencies that we are fighting, then please do so, because every little bit kind of helps right now. But thank you to all our listeners and viewers for watching. My name is John Potter. You can follow everything to do with myself at John Potter LD. You can follow everything to do with the podcast at Lib Dem Pod. Thank you very much for listening. We'll have another episode very soon.